Hello, ladies. It's Renee, host of the Welcome to Your Life podcast. Have you thought of recording your own podcast, but the thought of learning new technology was too frightening? I know exactly how you feel. That's how I felt until I found Anchor. Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place, and it's free. You can record from your phone or your computer, and the creation tools allow you to record and edit your podcast so it sounds great. They'll even distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard everywhere on places like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many, many more. You can easily make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Trust me, you will not regret it. Although the world is full of suffering, it is full also of the overcoming of it. Helen Keller. Hello, truth seekers. You are listening to the Welcome to Your Life podcast. I am your host, Renee Reed. Welcome to Your Life is an Atlanta-based lifestyle podcast for women, helping you to live the life you deserve. Yes, you can get organized, live a balanced life, and get rid of your belly fat. If you're looking for tips on how to energize your relationships, faith, wellness goals, and parenting, you've found your tribe. Welcome home. If you haven't done so already, don't forget to subscribe. And for those of you with a little extra change in your pocket, please consider becoming a monthly donor. Your gifts help to sustain our community and provide for future episodes. In today's episode, I am having a conversation with my son, Alex. We deep dive into why he decided to transition from Christianity to Buddhism and what he's learned in his 7 years of being a practicing Buddhist, and also how it has impacted his relationships with his family and friends. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Today I am joined by my number one son, Alex. And Alex, thank you so much for agreeing to allowing me to interview you today. So how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
That's awesome. So before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you go to school? What did you study?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I went to Wabash College, and I studied philosophy there, earned a bachelor's degree. And currently I work in the IT industry as a business analyst and a Scrum Master. So I'm certified in Scrum, Six Sigma, and ITIL.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't understand anything you said, but it sounds great. So I know you were in the military for a little bit. How long did you serve, and what branch were you in?
I served in the United States Marine Corps for 8 years before being honorably discharged.
Awesome. And thank you for your service. So today we're talking about your transition and your journey into Buddhism.
Mm-hmm.
How long have you been a Buddhist now?
I've been practicing Buddhism for 7 years.
Okay. And just to give everyone a little bit of background, you grew up in the Pentecostal church. Granny and I took you every Sunday, right? So you were very active in the youth ministry. And So talk a little bit about transitioning from, Christianity to Buddhism. Like, was there some, major event that triggered that transition, or was it something you were searching for? How did that come about?
Well, I never set out with the goal to stop being a Christian, but what happened was in my mid-20s, I just reached a point where materially I had everything that I thought I was supposed to have in order to be happy, and I just wasn't. So at that point, I started looking, for alternatives, ways to live my life and alternative things to do, ways to spend my time. And I looked around, I studied a lot of different philosophies, and I happened to find a Buddhist book called Hardcore Zen by Brad Warner, which really piqued my interest just because a lot of the self-help books that I'd read up till then were very wishy-washy and presented a view of the world that I frankly wasn't living in. And the book, if you ever look at the cover, is literally a toilet in a nightclub, and it's dirty, and you almost don't realize it's a book about Buddhism until you read the title on the back. But it just presented what I felt was a very realistic view of the world and some very realistic ideas about, how to deal with the suffering that I had. So that led me down a rabbit hole, and here I am 7 years later as a Buddhist teacher.
Awesome. Okay. So for those of us who, don't know a whole lot about Buddhism, and I took a class about 100 years ago in college and have completely forgotten everything. Tell us a little bit about the philosophy of Buddhism.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, I'll start by telling you a little bit about the founder, if you will, of Buddhism, Shakyamuni Buddha, who grew up as a prince in a palace in modern-day India. And long story short, his father was told that he would either be a world-turning monarch or a great holy man on the day that he was born. And his father, who was a king, naturally wanted his son to follow in his footsteps. So he gave Shakyamuni everything he could possibly want. He had access to money, to women, to wealth. He lived in an enclosure where nothing bad was allowed in. So everyone was healthy and fit. There were no sick people or dying people. He was a great scholar. He had access to the best teachers and athletic trainers. He was also a great athlete. And he had an experience that I think a lot of us in the West have, where he had everything that was supposed to make him happy, and he just wasn't happy. So at that point, what happened is he took a few trips outside the palace, saw the real world, saw death, saw aging, saw a holy man, and from there he went on his own spiritual journey, which at the end of which he sat under the Bodhi tree with the vow that he would sit there until he either realized enlightenment or died. And he realized enlightenment. So when he went to explain his teachings and his philosophies to other people, he summed them up in the 3 marks of existence, the 4 noble truths, and the Eightfold Path. So the 4 noble truths, which are kind of the heart of Buddhism or the core, state life is suffering. Suffering is caused by desire. The way to end suffering is to end desire, and the way to end desire is the Eightfold Path. So in many ways, it's kind of the scientific method applied to everyday life would be the easiest way to think of it. In Buddhism, we use meditation to calm our minds. And then once we're calm, we look at our actions, we look at the karma or the consequences of those actions, and we strive to make decisions that make life simpler and more peaceful for ourselves and for others.
Oh, okay, great. So do you, or before you made this transition into Buddhism, do you, or were you feeling some of the same kinds of angst that the prince was feeling before, as he traveled in his country to see what the real world looked like? Were you feeling that something was missing?
Yes, absolutely I was. I've always been a very goal-driven person. And I think, and I still am, but back then, I definitely feel like every time I went after a goal, it was the idea that it would fulfill something inside of me that I felt was missing. So, as you know, I joined a fraternity in college. I enlisted in the Marine Corps. I started work in corporate America, got another job that was supposed to be better than the last one, bought a bunch of stuff. And each time I was waiting for that aha moment where I would just feel okay or better with my life situation. And when that didn't happen, that's what led me to Buddhism.
Okay. And do you think that that is something that is special to your generation because you are a millennial? Or do you think that it's something that each generation kind of has to figure out on their own, that in the end, accumulating a bunch of stuff is not the thing that's going to bring you happiness, but that it has to be something that comes from within you?
Mm-hmm. I definitely think it's sort of a universal truth in a way. Everyone has that experience. I think what's different about my generation is that we have a lot more access than anyone has ever had before. As a millennial, I can pull out my laptop or my phone and look up anything. I can get food, clothing, movies delivered directly to my door. Access to education is better than it's ever been. So I feel like we're kind of the test case of the idea that material goods should make you happy, because if anyone should be happy, it should be us, because we have access to so much. And yet we're finding that in many ways we were lied to, that material success and material goods are nice for sure. They make life easier, but there's a lot of existential questions that they don't answer.
True. And you are a Buddhist teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about the program you completed. It was a 2-year program, correct?
Yes.
What's the name of it, and what exactly did you learn during that during your studies?
Sure. Well, the program is run by Reverend Kakuyo Kubose, and it's called the Bright Dawn Center of Oneness Buddhism. And the way it was founded is that his father, Reverend Guillaume Kubose, started off by running an independent Buddhist church in Chicago, Illinois. And it was a Pure Land Buddhist church. And the concept, which was controversial at the time, was that the Buddhist Pure Land wasn't a celestial realm or somewhere you went to after you died. Instead, it was this current world we're living in, and that if we purify our minds enough and practice hard enough, then we'll be able to see this world as the Pure Land and live here peacefully and well. So that's what he taught, and he also strived to Americanize the teachings in a way with a little bit less of a focus on ritual and more of a focus on integrating your spirituality with daily life. So Reverend Guillaume with the Bright Dawn Center carries on that tradition, and he offers a lay ministry program where we essentially have a online Sangha where we read books, write papers, and discuss them every week with our lay ministry class. And then other lay ministers who've gone through the program before us will give talks each week. Reverend Kakuyo also gives Dharma talks on his own each Sunday that we can listen to. And in that way, we're able to gain a really strong intellectual understanding of the teachings because we read text from many different traditions, which is another thing that's different about Bright Dawn, is it's non-sectarian. So we study Pure Land Buddhism, we study Zen Buddhism, we study secular Buddhism. Some of the books are very technical and very philosophy-oriented, and some are more geared towards everyday practice. So we gain a very well-rounded understanding of the teachings. Reverend Kakuyo himself, in addition to his Pure Land training, spent a number of years in Japan studying with Soto and Rinzai Zen teachers. So he's kind of integrated many of these teachings into his own philosophy, which he then passed on to us.
Wow. And what are you able to do with this? Is it a certification? Are you licensed? What exactly did you earn?
Well, we're lay teachers, so we use the word induction. And essentially what that means is I'm authorized to teach Buddhism. So I can lead meditation classes. I write a blog and do videos, which is the primary way that I teach. But I'm able to give teachings. I'm also able to do weddings or officiate funerals, things of that nature.
Oh, okay. All right. And I'm thinking about something you said about your generation being the test subject for happiness, which is really, that has really kind of triggered this question that I want to ask you, is how has being a Buddhist impacted the way you live your life?
It's impacted it in quite a few ways. It's interesting because if you look at the story of the Buddha, he went through a couple of extremes before he found the middle way. So he went from being a prince to being an ascetic to the point where he was eating 1 grain of rice a day and he almost starved to death. And then when he realized he wasn't learning anything, he was just hungry, he gave up the ascetic lifestyle and became a wandering monastic living the middle way. And I definitely didn't do anything that extreme, but I kind of had a similar journey in that I was living a really materially focused life before I started practicing Buddhism. And then I kind of went straight to the other extreme where I got rid of all my stuff and I spent about 8 months working on organic farms because I thought that was a better lifestyle in terms of spiritual practice. And it was good for me, but not in the way I thought it was going to be, because it showed me that just changing your surroundings doesn't necessarily change your suffering, that it really does. You have to change the inside. So at this point, I kind of live what I think of as the middle way. You know, I have an apartment again and things of that nature, but I live a minimalist lifestyle. So I don't own a car. And before I make purchases, I always think very heavily about, do I actually need this thing? Is it something that will help me in my job or in my interaction with others? Or is this just purely for because it's the cool new thing? And if that's the case, then I don't buy it. So I'd say what Buddhism has done is showed me how to live a conventional lifestyle, but live it more skillfully in such a way that I'm still meeting, the 4 requirements that Buddha laid out. food, shelter, clothing, medicine, but doing it in a much more intelligent way than I was doing it before.
Okay. And you mentioned this term, suffering. What exactly, how do you define that? What exactly does that mean?
Well, the original word for suffering in Pali was dukkha, and there are a couple ways to translate that. Pali is hard to translate because it was originally an oral language that wasn't meant to be written down. And once you write it down, the way you deal with the commas and things, spaces and stuff like that can change the meaning of a word. But the best interpretation I've seen for that is difficult to carry or hard to bear. So another word or another phrase we can use beyond suffering is just hard to carry. So life is hard to carry. And what makes it hard to carry is our desires. So if we learn to desire fewer things and learn to accept the world as it is, our packs become lighter and our lives become lighter and, easier to deal with. So you could think of it that way. Another way to think of it would be sort of an existential angst or dissatisfaction with the way life is, an itch that you can't quite scratch.
Okay. And that's, I work in the field of mental health. I've been in that field now for over 10 years. And so I deal with a lot of people who are suffering due to their mental illness, and also due to the fact that part of change in anything is realizing that there is a need for it. And so do you think that sometimes we know that we're suffering? Like, I have clients who know that they're suffering and that they need to take their medications or they need to practice their coping skills, but they are still trying to live in two worlds almost. So they're trying to live the way they hoped or the way they were told they should live, and they're trying to live the way that they know they need to live in order to survive. Do you find that when you talk to other Buddhists that that type of suffering has drawn them into the practice?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's something that all Buddhists deal with to various degrees. In Zen Buddhism, where I've done most of my training, we talk about living life fully and living it 100%. So when you wash dishes, just wash dishes. When you sit on the cushion, just sit on the cushion. Seated meditation is a really good practice for this because it seems like it would be really easy to just sit there and not do anything else. But as soon as you start sitting, you want to get up and check your email, or you want to see what the cat's doing, or maybe you just want to move around because you haven't done that for a while, or maybe you're physically still, but your mind is going in a million different directions. And a big part of the practice is learning to just do that one thing, whether it's sitting or talking to another person or walking down the street. And I find with suffering, at least this has been my experience in my own life, is that a lot of it comes from me trying to do multiple things at once and not being fully committed to anything, for various reasons. So with our negative mental habits that maybe your clients deal with, and like you said, they know they need to stop drinking, let's say, because of their mental health, but they also know that they like drinking with their friends, and they're trying to do both these things. Or they need to practice their coping skills, but they're in an environment where you expected to, not cope with things in a healthy manner. That can create a lot of distress because we have these habits that have built up over time. And it's difficult to break those habits unless we really want to. And I've found, at least in my own life, that sometimes it requires me just getting to a breaking point where I just cannot do these two things at the same time anymore. I have to make a choice. So for my own life, I don't drink anymore because I found that it wasn't helpful to my practice. And after a couple years of, well, I'm hungover and that's making it hard for me to meditate right now in the temple. Well, am I going to practice Buddhism or am I going to go out at night and drink? And I made the decision to, go deeper into my practice. And I find with people suffering, a lot of times it's the same way where we don't want to suffer anymore, but we also don't want to create the bad habits or the bad behaviors that are causing our suffering. And a big part of the practice is learning to make a choice. And either I'm going to do this thing and just accept the consequences that come with it, or I'm just not going to do it anymore.
Wow. Okay. That is really enlightening for me because it's almost everything that they teach us, when we're going through school and the extra training that we have to do to help our clients, to really help them to understand that you can't keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. And so to make that leap takes courage, and helping them find that courage is where I come in. But do you, as a lay minister, is that something that you help your, the people who are trying to find their way? Is that something that you help them with, to find that courage to leave things behind that no longer serve them?
Well, I don't think that I personally do it. I think the practice does that, and I'm more of a conduit for, the 2,600 years of teaching that have come before me, because a lot of times with people, they just need to know there is an alternative way to live. Because before I started practicing, I knew that what I was doing wasn't healthy, but I just honestly did not know what else I was supposed to do. Because everyone else went out and drank on Saturday, so I'm supposed to drink on Saturday. And everyone else, watches these violent movies and, swears like a sailor and, yells at people when they're mad. So I needed an example of someone not doing that for the light bulb to go off and say, I can make a different choice. And I needed the practice to help me build the habit so that I could make a different choice. So that was where my teachers were extremely helpful. Not even so much in the talks they gave, even though that was great, but just seeing how they handled tough situations and how they handled, situations where I screwed up even, and I did something that was not right. And, the calm that they showed in those situations. And that showed me that maybe I can do something different. So I think that's why practice is so important and why it's, pounded into us as Buddhists that we need to practice, because as we experience these things, then that shows us that we can go a different path and that it's okay to do that. So, for example, one thing that I struggled a lot with was anger, and I didn't know how to deal with that. And one of the tricks, I'll use that word, that they teach us in Buddhism is that if you're angry at someone, it's good to give them a compliment or a gift, because what that does is that action builds a different mind state than if you just feed your anger. Giving a gift or a compliment obviously is the obvious of that, so it kind of disentangles that whole thing. So I didn't really believe that it would work, but just out of trust in my teachers, I started doing that, and then I realized that one, it did make me less angry, even if the situation didn't change, my mind state did, and two, to my surprise, I found that if you give someone a compliment, a lot of times they'll give you a compliment back. So it showed me a different way to deal with those relationships that maybe weren't what I wanted them to be, that I didn't have to respond to anger with anger. I could respond to anger with kindness. And a lot of times that led to that person either being less angry or to them responding with kindness as well. So going back to breaking those mental habits, I think the practice is important in that way. And that requires a bit of faith. I think in the beginning, Buddhism isn't often thought of as a faith-based religion, but there's definitely a bit of faith required in just, the teachings have existed for 2,600 years, so I'm just going to trust them to work. And I think as a lay minister, that's something that I try to help people with, is just helping them learn to trust the teachings. And, just try it and see if it works. And if it does work, then keep doing it. And if not, no harm done. But just try it and see if it works.
And so during the 7 years that you've been practicing and making these, this leap of faith, making changes in your life, which I'm sure in the beginning was a little bit hard to do, but just having the faith that I'm going to trust that it will work, even though I don't see it right now. How has that impacted, your friendships or your family? Have you had any pushback from friends or family because you've decided to take this path?
Well, it's definitely affected my friendships, both positively and negatively. I guess the most blunt way that I could put this is that when you walk a spiritual path, it's not uncommon that you'll outgrow some people, not because they're bad necessarily, just because you're going in a different direction. So if you're walking down the street and they want to go straight and you want to take a right, you can't walk together anymore. That's just how the road works. So it was definitely my experience when I first started practicing and reevaluating some of my friendships that I realized that some of those people that I called friends weren't necessarily healthy for me. And some of them I was able to stay in contact with, even though we don't spend as much time together as we used to. And for some of them, I did have to cut ties just because we were heading in different directions. I'd say the friend group that I have right now is pretty positive with my Buddhist practice. It doesn't come up very often, but they'll ask me what I did this weekend. If I tell them I did a meditation retreat, they're okay with it, and they'll ask questions, or maybe they've tried to meditate and they'll ask me for some tips, things like that. With my family, I also think there was some pushback initially, but the longer I practiced and the more my family saw that this was helping me, not hurting me, I felt like they accepted it a bit more.
Yes, and I can attest to that. So, and I do see how, it has made a very positive change in your life. As you said, you had, you struggled with your anger, and that was from a young child. But I see how it has really made you a calmer person and more focused, more on building relationships with other people instead of building things or accumulating things. I am praying that we all go to church again one day, so don't hold that against me. But But I do see that this has been something that has been very positive for you. And so, as your mom, I'm just happy that you're happy at this point, And this is new to me, this adult parenting that I'm doing, and really allowing, your children to choose their path, and then just having faith that what you've taught them, they won't forget. So that's my motherly thoughts on the journey that you're taking. But the one thing I wanted to ask you is, I know that you're vegan.
Yes.
And is being Buddhist or being a Buddhist, is it a requirement that you are vegan or vegetarian?
I would say it's strongly encouraged, but it's definitely not required. A lot of it depends on the school of Buddhism that you're a part of. The historical Buddha was not vegan or vegetarian. He was a wandering monastic, and he only ate what was offered to him. So his practice was to eat what was freely given. So if someone gave him meat, he ate meat. If they gave him vegetables, he ate vegetables. But he didn't grow his own food. He and his monastics, they didn't hunt. They literally only ate what was given. And the reason for that is he wanted to maintain this very beautiful and very symbiotic relationship with the lay community, the non-monastics. So the monks were 100% dependent on the community for their food, shelter, medicine, and clothing. And then in exchange, this allowed the community to practice generosity, which built a kind, generous mind state in them. So that was a good, healthy practice. But it also allowed them to receive the teachings as well. So there was a symbiosis there. What happened, however, as Buddhism migrated through the world, Vajrayana Buddhism, which is largely practiced in Tibet and Nepal, they live in the mountains. So it's very high climate, very dry, rocky soil. Vegetables just really don't grow at that altitude very well. So they actually eat quite a bit of meat and animal products. And their practice is to do a very long, intense liturgy of chanting and prayer before and after in order to cleanse the negative karma that comes with eating meat. Now, for the Buddha, he did have some rules around meat consumption, which Vajrayana Buddhists also follow. So the meat could not be killed for him or his monastics, and it could not be killed within sight or hearing of them. So the consumption of meat wasn't negative from a karmic perspective, but the killing and the suffering that comes with the killing was. So that connection couldn't happen. And they also couldn't cause other people to kill. So of one of the forbidden professions in right livelihood, part of the Eightfold Path, animal butchery is not allowed for that reason. Again, because of the negative karma associated with killing animals. Now, in the Zen and Pure Land traditions, which is what I'm primarily a part of, that changed because then we had monasteries and we had monks receiving cash donations and then going to the market and buying food. So there was a real direct connection between what they were buying and what happened. So if they went and bought a chicken, that chicken was killed right in front of them. So it was killed for them. There was no question. So in the Zen tradition, for monastics at least, it's required in China and in Korea that they be either vegetarian or vegan. That used to be the rule in Japan up until the Meiji era, up to the point where if you were caught eating meat in monk's clothing, you could be punished by death. But the government during the Meiji era, in an attempt to destroy the Buddhist order, forced all the monastics to eat meat and to take wives because they were celibate during that time. And now that Buddhism is more established in those areas, vegetarianism it's not super common, but it's becoming more of the practice as well. It's seen more as an ascetic practice. So it did play a role for me as well, going vegetarian and then vegan, because my teachers were vegetarian. So I would go to these retreats and I'd go days without eating meat and I'd be perfectly healthy and fine. And then through meditation, feeling more of a connection with animals and feeling more in tune with their suffering, that caused me to eventually go vegan. In an attempt to get the nutrients I need, but also to create the least amount of suffering as possible, because I feel like my situation is most closely related to the Zen Buddhist in China, Japan, and Korea, where I'm going to the market, I'm buying food, so there's a direct karmic link between what I'm purchasing and whatever suffering happens on the other end.
So do you find that, I think it's easier now because I'm also vegan. I think we're the only two vegans in the family, although your brothers and sisters have started to decrease the amount of meat that they're consuming. Mm-hmm. But do you think that it's easier now to be vegan or vegetarian than it was, a while ago?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Just in the time that I've been vegan, it's become mainstream now. People are familiar with it. They know what it is. Most restaurants have vegan options available. You go into the store, and there's a whole vegan section just for you. So it's definitely become a lot easier to do. And that was another part of my reason for going vegan, was because, just going back to Vajrayana Buddhism, the Tibetans who live in the mountains, the only thing they have to eat is yak for the most part, and yak butter and yak milk, etc. But for me, going into a grocery store, I have a choice on what I want to eat and whether I'm going to get my protein from lentils or from dead cow. So I feel like the lentils is the compassionate choice, and I just have really fortunate karma in that I'm able to do that.
Yes, I agree. So if you had to choose one satisfying thing that you found on this journey, either about yourself or about the practice itself, what would it be?
I would say the most satisfying thing was just how malleable it actually is. When I first started practicing Buddhism, I had a very rigid view of it that, you had to be in a monastery in order to be Buddhist. And what I've learned over the past 7 years, and thanks to the teaching of, Reverend Kakuyo and others, is that Buddhism fits wherever you are. So you can be a monastic and be Buddhist. You can be a parent and be Buddhist. You can be a corporate executive and be Buddhist. And the practice isn't to try to be Buddhist, quote unquote, but to integrate Buddhist practice into your daily life. So a lot of the work I do as a lay minister is working with at-risk communities and also with activist communities as well, which is something that's really important to me. So a lot of my teaching outside of my blog and my YouTube channel is going to activist events and teaching them self-care techniques like mindfulness and meditation, so that they can go about their work, but go about it in such a way that it doesn't cause harm to them, that they don't experience angry mind states, and so that they're able to continue doing it long term without experiencing burnout. So that's probably the most satisfying thing, is just how my practice is able to fit into my daily life.
So it's more of a lifestyle for you, as opposed to just something you do on a certain day of the week.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great way to put it. So I have my Buddhist altar set up, in my apartment. I like to think of my apartment as my own hermitage or my own temple. And I sit and I meditate every day in the same way that I wake up and brush my teeth in the morning and at night. And I chant Nimbutsu the same way that I go to the grocery store and buy food in the evening. It's a part of my daily life or my daily ritual, as opposed to being something that's separate from it or in opposition to it.
Okay. And so if someone were thinking of becoming a Buddhist, what exactly would they need to do?
Well, I would suggest that first what they'd want to do is, do some research on their own. It's very easy to find lots of information online. There's my blog, of course, The Same Old Zen, and there's some really good ones out there as well. That's So Zen by Geshe Greenwood, Hardcore Zen by Brad Warner are some of my personal favorites. And The Tattooed Buddha is also good. And you can go to these different websites and you can read and learn about different Buddhist teachings and kind of figure out what kind of Buddhist do you want to be? How do you think the practice will fit into your life? Are you thinking about the monastic route? Is this something that you want to make part of your lifestyle and your daily practice, as I've done? And then from there, you can, just Google search and find a temple that's near you. And if you can do that, go visit their practice with them and see what the fit is like. You can also visit www.brightdawn.org, which is the website for the Bright Dawn Center of Oneness Buddhism, which I'm a part of. And there you can find pre-recorded teachings and books that can help you along the path.
Thank you for that. So, and I know that some people listening are, Christian or, some other faith. But I think that part of the reason that I think there's so much anguish in the world is that we have dug in our heels instead of trusting that our faith, whatever faith we choose to practice, will, do what it's supposed to do. And so that's why I think that, and that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on the program, is because, not just because I'm your mom, and but because I think that, part of my journey as your mom has been, watching you grow in this faith, and how it has, really made a positive impact on you. And so I just think that I think that we fight intolerance with education. And so that's what I'm hoping that this episode will be to educate people, Christians alike, who may not understand exactly what Buddhism is, but to help them understand more of what it is and how it's practiced, so that they become more enlightened, as I have become more enlightened. And being enlightened doesn't mean that you are going to become a Buddhist. I admire what it's done for you, but I am a Christian and believe in the teachings of Jesus Christ, and so that's what I am going to continue practicing. But that doesn't mean that, I have to cut you off as my son, which is, I would never do that. But I know that in some families, when a child veers towards a different path that has been, some of the reaction of the family members to cut them off. And so that's what I'm hoping, that you really explaining why you decided to, take this journey, how it has impacted your life, will really help other people to understand that, or other parents especially, when their child takes a path that may not be where they started, but to really understand how it is affecting them and their contribution to the world. And so now I'm preaching and rambling. But I know that you've worked with some, you've done some really great projects, interfaith projects with leaders from other faiths. What's one of the projects that you worked on? And, what did you guys, what did you hope to accomplish when you started the project, and was that fulfilled?
Sure. Well, one of the organizations that I volunteer with is IRTF, Interreligious Task Force on Central America, and they do really terrific, really multifaceted work, working with immigrants and undocumented workers in the U.S., but also in Latin America. And it's hard to really totally describe what they do because they do so much. But everything from sending people as election observers in Central America to make sure that people are able to vote, to working with undocumented workers and families here in the United States to, make sure that they have support, that they're able to get the legal support that they need, linking them up with other organizations that can help in various ways. Most recently, what we did was, and this is kind of an ongoing thing, is there was I'm not even sure what to call it, but essentially there was a raid done by ICE where they rounded up undocumented workers from a lot of different facilities, and we did a prayer vigil on their behalf outside of the ICE office near where I live. And essentially what we did there is I and other faith leaders really just reiterated from our different faith traditions, whether that was Christian or Catholic or Buddhist or Judaism, why it was so important to welcome the stranger and feel a oneness with the people who are being detained or downtrodden, especially, these undocumented workers who were doing nothing wrong but doing the job that they were hired to do. And then all of a sudden they're being detained and possibly, jailed or deported and things of this nature. So we did that, and that's an ongoing thing that is happening on a weekly basis where we're doing this vigil. And or I should say that they're doing this vigil. They're, kind of organizing the whole thing. But I think it's really great because it's showing solidarity first and foremost, but it's also showing the compassion that's inherent in the multitude of faith traditions that are involved in it.
Awesome. That's really great. And then I know you have a really popular blog, and you just started your YouTube channel. So what's the name of your blog?
The name of the blog is The Same Old Zen, www.sameoldzen.blogspot.com. And essentially what I do there is I give teachings, and a lot of times they're related to my own practice and my own daily life. So this thing happened to me, and this is the teaching that helped me get through it type of deal. And then I also try to take more canonical teachings like the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, etc., and break them down in such a way that they're a little little bit easier to understand from a Western standpoint. And so I update that weekly with a new article or post.
Awesome. And then you mentioned that your meditation is part of your daily, routine.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us 3 tips that would help us to become better at meditating?
Sure. Well, I'd say the first one is just to do it and not worry so much about doing it right or being good at it. A lot of times when I work with people and try to teach them meditation, they start off by telling me what a bad meditator they are. And then when I ask what they mean, they describe the exact same struggles that everyone has with meditation, which, I can't sit still, or I don't know what to think about, or, it's boring, or I fall asleep. And those are experiences that everyone has. So it's not something that you should feel ashamed about or embarrassed. That's part of the meditation. And the real key is to meditate anyway, even if you are on the cushion and you're moving around a lot. Just stay on the cushion. So that'd be number 1. Number 2 would be consistency is more important than length of time. So I always tell people just start with 1 minute a day, because everyone can do 1 minute a day. Just start with that, do that consistently, and then let your own practice build from there to where you think you want to try 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. But just start, commit to 1 hour a day, or not 1 hour, 1 minute a day, and just do that consistently and see how it goes. And then also, in terms of what to do or what to think about while you're meditating, the practice that I was taught when I first started was mindfulness of breathing. And I find that it's very effective just because it's so simple. So you sit on the cushion, cross your legs and back straight. Almost try to make a circle with your hands. So your palms resting within each other, and then your thumbs, if you can imagine, kind of forming an arch. That's called the universal mudra or the samadhi mudra. So sit in that position, and then as you breathe, just really focus on the feeling of the air going in and out of your lungs, the expansion of your chest. And with each breath, each in and out, with the exhale, just count 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then count 10 breaths, and then start over again. And if your mind wanders, that's fine. That happens with everyone, including Buddhist teachers like myself. But when your mind wanders, just bring your focus back to your breath. And what you're doing there essentially is building the habit of not allowing your thoughts to control you, essentially. So just allow that to happen. Your thoughts wander, bring your focus back to the breath. It wanders again, bring your focus back to the breath. And little by little, you'll find that it'll become easier to focus on your breathing, and your thoughts won't be as rampant as they probably are in the beginning. So those 3 tips, I think, would be the best. 1, focus on your breathing. 2, be consistent. And 3, just keep trying, even if you think you're not good at it.
And that's as with everything, keep trying. Consistency is the key to being successful at anything. So thank you so much for that. So this is a question that was asked of me recently, and I decided that I am going to ask it of everyone that I interview this year. So the question is, how do you think that we as a people can bring more peace into the world?
I think the best way for us to bring more peace into the world would be to start with bringing more peace into ourselves. People have, especially in the West, have a very outward focus where we think if we can just fix everyone else, that things will be better. And that's not to say that we shouldn't interact with the outside world or try to improve things when we can. But if you're an angry, hateful person trying to fix the world, then you're going to do that in an angry, hateful way, and you're probably going to make it worse instead of better. So I would say if we really want the world to be calmer and a gentler place, we should start with ourselves and with our spiritual practice. And what ends up happening from the Buddhist perspective is as we practice Buddhism and we become calmer and we become more skillful in our actions, then we'll create the causes for other people to be calmer and more skillful in their actions. So as an example, if I come home from work and I have a bad day and I'm feeling very angry, but because of my practice, I know I should meditate to deal with that anger as opposed to taking my anger out on the next person I meet. Well, now I've created a much calmer world, because when I interact with that person, if I meditated first and I've calmed myself down, well, now I'm interacting with them in a kind manner, versus if I, interact with them in an angry manner, well, now I've created a chain of events that can lead to them maybe doing the same thing to another person who might do it to another person. So we have all these causes and effects that we're responsible for as individuals that we don't really think about. But if we can get ourselves under control and not worry so much about other people, then that creates a lot of ripple effects in the world.
Thank you for that. So any final tips or advice or final words you'd like to give us before we finish this up, so you can go on and do whatever it is that you do in the evening since you don't have a TV? It's not TV?
No, I don't have a TV.
Anything you want to leave us with?
Sure. I would just start piggybacking on your last question, that all of us have the power to create positive change in the world, because we can create positive change in ourselves. So if we're unhappy with the state of the world right now, then we can take back a little bit of control by trying to create positive change in our own lives.
Thank you so much for being my son. I'm very proud of you, and how you have grown into a fine young man. I would like to think that I had a little bit to do with it. Well, your dad also. But thank you so much for being on the show, and I'm just really grateful to be your mom.
Thanks. I'm grateful to be your son.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Although the world is full of suffering, it is full also of the overcoming of it. Helen Keller. I can't wait to hear your thoughts on today's episode. You can comment below or shoot me an email, reneereed@reneereed.net. Have you subscribed yet? If not, I want to encourage you to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. Becoming a monthly donor is a great way to keep the flow of ideas moving and changing our world I can't do what I do without you. So thank you in advance for becoming a monthly donor of this podcast. Don't forget to share this episode with someone you love. Until next time, remember this. You are stronger than you give yourself credit and more blessed than you know. We'll talk soon.